Steven Stevesbets Jacobs is known as one of the best heads-up no-limit hold'em players in the world. The 25-year-old Philadelphia native graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with a degree in economics. He had planned on becoming a teacher and had even entered into Penn's Graduate School of Education, but apparently his degree kicked in and he realized that it made more economic sense to pursue a budding career in poker. Jacobs' heads-up experience is extensive. He won the first ever high-stakes showdown on PokerStars, a heads-up tournament with a whopping $10,000 buy-in. He has also done very well for himself in the heads-up sit-and-goes, earning the majority of his money through those since college. Most recently, Jacobs took down the huge $25,000 buy-in heads-up event in the currently running PokerStars World Championship of Online Poker. He took home $560,000 for his win, his biggest score to date. We have Jacobs on the phone today to go over a few hands from a match that he played during that event. Let's go ahead and get into Steve Betts' head. Okay, we have Steve on the phone here today. Thank you for joining us today, Steve.
No problem.
So first off, before we get into any specific hand examples, I had a few hands here that I saw from your hand history that you had played that I kind of wanted to go into that bring up general points. So this is a heads-up match, and you have like ace rag on the button, and both times, a few times that I saw in hands, you would raise with ace rag on the button in position, which is pretty standard, but then when you get re-raised, you pretty much immediately give it up. Well, what is the thought process behind that entire thing?
Well, as far as immediately give it up, I do everything immediately, so don't take anything from that. Second, in terms of getting re-raised with ace-x, you do it position, so calling isn't the worst thing in the world if you're playing against an opponent that re-raises a lot. But this was a match against Paul, who did in fact re-raise a lot. He was a very aggressive opponent. And given that he was very aggressive post-flop too. And ace-x is a really tough hand to play post-flop against an aggressive opponent, because even if you hit like pretty much your best reasonable scenario of flopping an ace, you can't be sure it's good in the re-raise pot. And, you know, we're playing deep in the 25 hands up tournament, so you really want hands that are going to make big hands or nothing. Like these sort of speculative hands, you don't want to play a huge pot with, so I just fold them.
Okay, so you're saying almost that you'd rather be getting into a re-raise pot with like 5-6 suited than ace-7 or ace-x, basically. Is that true?
Definitely.
Okay. Just because it's so easy to get away from on the flop, or if you flop something and he flops something, it's a lot easier to extract value out of it. Okay. All right, let's actually get into the specific hands then. The first hand I'm looking at here is hand number 851. And by the way, all of these hands are, I mean, you won the heads-up tournament, obviously, but all of these hands that we're going to discuss are with your match against Pa, who you thought was a particularly aggressive opponent, who you played some particularly interesting hands with. So this first hand that we're going to get into, you have Jack-8 suited, and you're in the big blind, and he raises and you call pre-flop. He raises to 320. It's a min raise. So you're pretty much calling anything against a min raise in the big blind, aren't you, or is that not the case?
I mean, not anything, because you're out of position. So there's some hands you just don't want to bother with, but pretty much, yeah.
Well, you say there are some hands you don't want to bother with, but with those kinds of pot odds and the implied odds as far as how deep your stacks are, is it not worthwhile to see pretty much any flop to see if you can get some action with that kind of raise?
We are deep stacked enough that I think the whole implied odds thing doesn't matter too much, because, for example, let's say you have a hand like, I don't know, like 8 deuce or something offsuit, and then he min raises. Okay, you can call to try to flop a huge hand, but even if you flop like, you know, even if you flop top pair, like at 8-5-3 or something, you know, what are you going to do with it? It's tough to play out of position. Some hands just aren't worth it.
Okay. But so you call with Jack-8 suited, so you got suited connectors, it's like a 2-gapper, and the flop comes down 10-9-2, so you filled up your gap, you now have an open-ended draw, and there are 2 clubs on the flop, so now you have a flush draw as well. And you check to him, he bets 480, and you check raise him. What's your thought process behind the check raise? I mean, obviously you have a strong hand, but what are you trying to accomplish?
Well, I'd be happy to win the pot right there. Additionally, I'd be happy to get a call by something like a 10 or maybe a 9, because then I can see how the turn comes and go from there. But I have a big hand that's capable of making the nuts or close to the nuts in a lot of different ways. It's the type of hand where in a normal heads-up sit and go, I wouldn't think twice about calling my whole stack with it. Maybe not necessarily a this sit and go, but either way, I have a really big hand, so I'm raising for both semi-bluff and for value.
Okay. And you said that in a normal sit and go, you'd be willing to kind of go with your entire stack on this hand just because you have so many outs. Is this tournament different just because of the big buy-in and the deep stacks, or like what in particular makes this tournament a little bit different where you might try to get away from it?
Well, both of those factors make a difference. The big buy-in, not necessarily because I'm more scared to get it in that way, but just because given that it's a deep stack big buy-in, players aren't going to be stacking off early on deep stacks with marginal holding. Mm-hmm. Like, if this was a sit and go, he could easily stack off with a lower flush draw and be drawing practically dead. That's not really going to happen in this tournament, so you need to be a bit more selective.
Okay.
If you get a lot of action on the hand.
Okay. Well, and you kind of did get a lot of action on the hand. I mean, you check raised to 1,280, and he re-raised you again to 4,250. So once he re-raises you there, re-raises your check raise, which is already showing a lot of strength, what's going through your head? What kind of hands do you put him on, and what courses of action do you see yourself taking?
Frankly, a lot of players there, like, for example, I believe that my second round opponent, Isaac Caxton, would have re-raised over the top pot, committing himself right there. I think a lot of players would have done that, and frankly, it's not the worst move in the world. I elected not to do that because his hand looked up to me like it was either top two pair or a set at that point. The pot was not big pre-flop, as you pointed out. It was just a minimum raise. And then I chose strength by check raising, and he's coming back and re-raising 1/16 of his stack almost. So it looks like a big hand. So I'm going to just call, and I'm actually going to hope to hit my straight because he won't be able to put me on it,
right,
unlike the flush draw. And I think that maybe I'll be able to stack him off if I hit my straight, and definitely win more chips if I hit a flush.
Okay. Well, and so, like we had pointed out, the pot on the flop was only 640, but now that we've had all this flop action, it's already up to over 9K. And the turn puts out the 3 of hearts, which misses you. So what is your thought process now? You're the first to act.
Okay, so at this point, I'm thinking he has a really big hand. It's a total blank on the turn. There's no big hand on the flop he's going to have that he's really going to fold no matter what I do on the turn. So I want to see the river as cheaply as possible because I still have a lot up. So I check to him, and I hope he does the pot or less. If he does a big overbet, I may have to let my hand go.
Okay. And so you really are considering letting your hand go even though you have a big draw. I mean, is it basically because you only have one card left, your odds are so much lower, or is it also does it also have to do with the fact that even if you hit a club, you may not get paid off?
Well, there's all those considerations. A club may not get paid off. The fact that it's not really necessarily the odds of hitting with only one card to come, but it's the fact that I know he has such a big hand that I'm not going to be able to bluff him off on the river, most likely, unless I hit one of my cards.
Okay.
And, like, the only way he'll fold is if a club comes. So it's just sort of like, it's not the greatest spot for me once the turn comes out of position, too.
Yeah. Well, and he pretty much got as close as he could to keeping you in. He bet 8,880 in chips, and the pot was only, like I said, it was about 9,100. So that was pretty much a pot-sized bet. And like you said, you elected to call because you aren't gonna try to get too aggressive on this turn here. So the river puts out the 6 of clubs, which gives you your hand. You got to be pretty certain that you're ahead now, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's always that small chance that he has enough flush draw and he was betting it really aggressively. I'd say I was like 98% sure I had the best hand. To me, I think betting out there looks incredibly strong. It looks like a flush 100% of the time. Now, I could have bet out. I probably should have. It might have been a mistake to check it because the club is so obvious. But my opponent was aggressive, and I thought that if I bet out any reasonable amount, like the pot was like 30,000 almost, which was half of our remaining stacks. And I didn't think there was any chance I could get a call on a bet like that, even from a set. So I figured if I check, maybe he'll, let's say he has a set of nines or something, maybe he'll put me on 2 pair or a lower set, and he'll try to put in a little value that, and then I can maybe check raise him minimum or something like that.
Okay. Well, but like you kind of brought up, when you're playing at this high of a level against presumably pretty decent opponents, isn't it a lot of the time when you see a scare card like something that completes a flush come on the river, they're almost expecting someone to bluff at that in a big pot. So could you not have bet with the intention of trying to get raised or getting a bigger him to call a big bet?
That's certainly true, and that might have been the optimal play. There's always room for second guessing.
Yeah. Well, being results-oriented, obviously, you probably should have bet, but, I mean, you couldn't have known for sure that he was going to check. So basically, you check, and he checks behind you, and he shows down one of the hands that you had put him on, 9-10 for top 2 pair on the flop, and you took down about a $27,000 pot early on in the tournament, so early on in this match, I should say. All right, let's go on to the next hand then. The next hand we have here, it's hand number 926. Again, it's against Paw 717. And you're dealt ace-4 offsuit in the small blind, and you elect to raise pre-flop. Can you talk about the pre-flop action?
I'm not looking at the hands. I did 2 times or 3 times.
You raised to 720, and the blinds were at, big blind was 240.
All right. Pretty standard pre-flop raise. I have ace with probably the 10. Just out of the position, you raise almost every hand, so I just raised to see what happens. Okay.
So, I mean, the hand was pretty irrelevant at this point, although you were probably relatively happy to see an ace there. And like you were saying, though, I mean, if you had gotten re-raised here after you did your standard 3x raise, would you have given this up?
Probably.
Okay. So, but I mean, that obviously wasn't the case, or else we wouldn't have much of a hand to talk about here. He ended up calling your raise to 720, and the flop comes down ace-king-4, complete rainbow, and you hit 2 pair. So he's out of position against you, and he ends up checking. What's going through your head right now? How do you try to maximize your profits on this hand with 2 pair?
Okay. Well, first of all, top and bottom pair. Really deep stack heads up. Sometimes that's not going to be good, but in this particular situation, he would have certainly. Can you hear me?
Yes.
He would have certainly re-raised pre-flop with ace-king or pocket kings, which are pretty much the 2 hands that beat me. So I know I have the best hand, and I just want to get value, so I make a standard continuation bet, and hope he has a little something.
Okay, so you bet half the pot. The pot's like 1,400 right now. You bet 720, same bet as you made pre-flop, and he ends up calling. The turn puts out the 8 of diamonds. I mean, couldn't affect the hand much, right?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much, unless he has ace-8, it's a perfectly safe turn, so I still want to get value.
Okay, so he checks, and you bet 2,200 into a $2,800 pot, and he calls again. So now he's called you twice, and you've shown aggression twice after raising pre-flop and on an ace-high flop. What kind of hands are you putting him on if he's continually check calling to you with that kind of scary board?
At this point, I think that there's a good chance he has ace rag. Frankly, once he's calling 2 streets, I raise pre-flop and I bet the flop, that's a turn. He has to put me on something. Although I guess it's possible I'm just betting like a gut shot, like queen jack or queen 10, and just hoping for a fold. But pretty much an ace or a king. I actually was leaning towards an ace at that point.
You were leaning towards him having an ace?
Yeah, but I, I'm still 100% sure when he just calls that I have the best hand. So to me, that's more important than what specific hand he has at that point.
Okay. Well, so then when he calls you on the turn, what kind of cards are you thinking might be scare cards for you on the river?
The worst card for me is a king, by far.
Okay.
Because it would counterfeit my 2-pair, and it would give me no kicker on my ace. If the 8 comes, it counterfeits my 2-pair, but I still have the king kicker, so I chop against most aces, and I still beat a king. So really the only card I don't want to see is the king.
Okay. Well, and like you said, you put him on an ace with a raggedy kicker, and so are you almost scared of a few more rags coming out, another rag coming out, possibly giving him a better 2-pair? Or is that not really crossing your mind?
I mean, you can't fear every card, so that wasn't really going through my head at that point.
Okay. So the river brings out the 9 of clubs. It's a rag, but like you said, you aren't too scared of that kind of thing, and it doesn't complete any other draws, so you still have to be pretty certain that you're ahead at this point, and paw checks to you. So what are you going to do to maximize your profits at this point when he has nothing else coming for him?
I mean, at that point, I'm still, 99% certain I have the best hand, because he's definitely not going to just call it set on the flop of the turn. He's that type of player. So I just want to bet as much as I can to try to get value out of either an ace or a king. Okay.
So you bet 7,200, and it's about the size of the pot. It's barely less than the size of the pot. If you're betting that much, I mean, is that a pretty standard bet in a heads-up match like this, or what can you get called by if you're betting basically the pot?
You can get called by any ace, pretty much, because some players will not fold top pair no matter what.
Okay.
And against a lot of players, you can get called by a king, and then you can even get called by some lower pairs sometimes.
Okay, like maybe a pocket pair that doesn't believe that you have one of those overcards?
Against some opponents, you can get called by queen high.
Okay. So a pretty wide range here. You bet the 7,200, pot size bet, and he ends up check raising you to 24,000. What kind of, I mean, does that make you think that you could possibly be behind now, or are you still pretty confident?
This was one of the few points in the match where I actually stopped and thought. So I did not like to see the check raise at first, to be honest. Given that I had put him on an ace, the hand that immediately jumped to mind was ace-9. Mm-hmm. I'm almost certain he's not check raise bluffing me, because I've shown a lot of strength. I can have a set or ace-king, some sort of hand that I'll never fold on that board. So I'm just trying to think of what hands he could be raising that he's valued at it. And a few hands came to mind. And actually, I had a friend that was just sitting there watching, so I was saying this out loud. I mean, he didn't say anything, but I was just explaining my thought process as I was sitting there thinking. I said, ace-9, oh God, does he really have ace-9? Like, that would be a sick river. And I'm just sitting there thinking, and I almost clicked fold, actually, because to me, ace-9 made the most sense. Mm-hmm. Then there was that very slight possibility that it was pocket 9. Some players could certainly call the flop and turn with pocket 9s, just hoping they're good, mm-hmm. And then hit the miracle on the river. And that would be a hand he would certainly check raise on the river. But then the thought of king 9 came into my mind, and I thought to myself, it's very possibly called on a king. In some ways, it's more likely than an ace, since I have an ace. And then when he hits 2 pair of king 9 on a clean board, he's an aggressive opponent. He thinks I'm aggressive. He actually would check raise that, even though I wouldn't check raise it if I was in this, I thought. But this person might. So then I really started thinking it was between ace 9 and king 9. And I put the idea of pocket nines out of my head. It was possible, but incredibly unlikely.
Right.
And if he has it, so do you. So I decided it was pretty much 50-50 between ace-9 and king-9. And I was to call if that was the case, so I called.
So you called, and you were half right. It was king-9, and which is very good news for you. And you probably wouldn't have gone. Did you think he would have? I mean, would he have at least called on the river, or would you think he would have folded to your pot-sized bet on the river there if he hadn't hit his two-pair?
King-9, I would have not called the river. There's no way I would fold my hand, but I don't really see that much value in check raising. And as you can see, based on my thought process, the only value in check raising was that it might get me off a slightly stronger two-pair.
Right.
Which is sort of interesting, but I doubt that was his thought process.
I doubt it too. I doubt he put you on exactly two-pair, but maybe, who knows? So that was a huge pot in the tournament. But after that, you actually ended up losing a bit of ground until you got to... You ended up doubling up on a few hands, and he ended up gaining the chip lead, but finally you pulled into the lead again right before this hand here that we're going to talk about. You have 10-3 suited pre-flop, and Pa min raises pre-flop to 480, and you call out of position. So are you calling with that kind of hand out of position? I mean, we were talking about this earlier, how you aren't going to call with every kind of hand to a min-raise pre-flop. Why does this kind of hand constitute a call pre-flop?
It doesn't necessarily.
Okay.
There's just a lot. I play based on the flow of what I'm feeling. It's a min-raise, so as you point out, you pretty much can justify calling anything.
Okay.
I don't necessarily call everything though. In this case, it was suited. He was playing aggressively. If I flopped a draw, I had him way out chipped at that point, so I would be willing to pot commit myself with a flush draw and hopefully take down the pot.
Okay.
So it was just. Wait, are you sure that he min-raised and he didn't just win pre-flop?
No. It says that he min-raised. It says you raised 240 to 480, and you called 240.
Let me see. Okay. All right. Yeah. So that was my thought process.
Okay. And so the pot right now is 960, pretty low, especially for your chip stack, still pretty low. Flop comes down ace 10-3, which, ding, 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 has got to be the best kind of possible hand for you. You flop two pair, and there's an overcard on the board, so if he has that, you may get paid off big time on this. Well, what is your thought process here? Your first act.
Okay, my first thought process is, just what you said. Let's get this all in and end the match. So he makes a standard continuation bet, and I raise. I expected that if he had an ace, he'd probably call, maybe re-raise big. If he just shoves there or does something to clearly pot commits himself, I would probably put it in. Probably. But so I check raise, and then he made a fairly small flop 3-bet, which really got me thinking. So at that point, I started thinking about his possible range of hands. He min-raised pre-flop, so it could be anything. Then when I check raise the flop, he 3-bets it small. He could be totally bluffing. That's one possibility. In which case, it's a pretty big mistake to fold. He could have an ace. At that point, he'd pretty much have to put his chips in with. And I'd be ahead of that, of course. I'd be probably 65% against an ace, depending on backdoor flush draws or whatever. So I would be pretty happy in that situation. Okay, on the other hand, the only other time the action has gone like this is when he has top two pair. On the hand that we talked about earlier. And if that is the case, he has me totally crushed and I'm drawing the 2 out. If he has either ace 10 or ace 3.
Mm-hmm.
So where does that leave me? It leaves me that in many cases, if I re-raise, I'm going to pick up 7,000 chips. His stack's 46,000. I have him over 2-1, and I'm only in the pot for about 3,000. at this point.
Right.
That's a good result, and it's a possible one, but I really didn't think he was 3-bet bluffing. That was the least likely of the options. Okay, if I'm ahead, great, he's going to put it in with an ace, and we're going to run it out. If he gets lucky, then he's going to be the chip leader, and otherwise I'll win the match. If he has me crushed, he's going to be the chip leader almost certainly. So this might have not been a good fold. I think I might have been the only player in the tournament that would have made the fold there. And the reason I did is because of the tons and tons of heads-up sit and goes I played. I thought I had an edge on par, and I didn't want to put all my chips in, or his chips in this marginal spot, because I had him kind of like on the mat, so to speak.
Right.
He was getting short stacked. I felt like I could really outplay him without any risk, pretty much, or well, with some risk, but with way more minimal risk than the risk represented here by putting him with bottom two pair against either a hand that has me crushed or a hand that I have a slight edge on.
Right. And yeah, I suppose even if he does have an ace, I mean, you could get running cards for, a two pair on the board that he would beat you with to counterfeit your hand, or so I guess not risking it. But the fact that you call it a marginal hand is kind of funny, though, because most people wouldn't even that word wouldn't even enter their minds on this kind of flop.
Right. It's not a marginal hand given the action if it comes on.
Right.
It's a very clean board. If there was a flush draw on the board, I would have put it in probably, because that would have suddenly been by far his most likely hand. Although actually, if he's in a flush draw would be like 50-50. So that wouldn't really be a great result. But just given that it's a very clean board, there's not that much he could be making that sort of play. There's even the slight possibility that he has like pocket threes underneath. It's not incredibly likely, but it's possible. And so there's a number of hands that just have me buried. If I had ace 3 or ace 10, I would probably just put it in because those hands are way less likely to get beat if they're ahead.
Right. All right. So you ended up letting this one go. He took down that pot.
I was regretting that big time, by the way, when he came back later in the match and got the chip lead. But
well, but I mean, he ended up getting the chip lead, but you ended up with all the chips in the end in this match, and you carried it through to take out Bertrand Elke Grosplier at the end, and you took down the $560,000 first place prize. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for watching the Online Zone on Card Player TV.